So welcome to the March Cloud Cafe. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, we appreciate you taking the time, and especially the time of tonight's panel. We've got 4 wonderful speakers joining us who are going to give us different perspectives on a topic that is very important and obviously getting more and more important every day. So today's topic is the reality of poverty in Stroud. And I think that we look at a lot of wonderful Cotswolds towns and think how blessed they are to live there and beautiful surroundings, but that doesn't take away from the fact that there are people struggling in these areas as well, and that services and support for them is not always sufficient. So, I mean, the number of children and families living in Stroud who are low income families is rising. I think it says here that the national average or the national data is that 13% of children live in food insecure households, and 12% of adults live with children report skipping meals. So I think there's this constant battle of, should I eat, or should I heat my home, or should I support my child to do something that they want to do, or where should I put my money that is not increasing, even though the cost of living is increasing massively, and as we see in particularly now with energy prices going up significantly. So all of these things tied together bring us to our second Cloud Cafe of the year, and I will pass over the baton and let one of our speakers introduce the session much better than I can, I'm sure. Our first speaker is Lynsey Kelleher, who is a single mom to 4 children. After reading through all these biographies and all these amazing jobs that people do, I think that's definitely the hardest one. So with no children, I absolutely take my hat off to you, Lynsey. But who during the pandemic went through some changes to circumstance, shall we say, and so has been battling that on a daily and seeing you know, how life pans out for Lynsey and her family. So Lynsey,
thank you, Jenny.
The floor is yours.
Okay, my name's Lynsey Kelleher, and I was asked to help set up a community hub for uplands in Stroud last year. I've been working with the other hubs around town to ensure that there is readily available food and support for anyone that needs it. There have been times when I certainly have. I was asked to come and talk at this Cloud Cafe in relation to my work with the hubs, and also as someone who's experienced what it is to live off of universal credit. I'll admit that when I was first asked, my initial reaction was to run a mile. Who likes talking about their finances? Who likes admitting that they've hit real difficult times and not knowing what to do? And it was my complete instinct to say, no, thank you, and politely walk away. Firstly, oh, I've lost my place. This is going to happen a lot, sorry. Firstly, I've never considered that my family and I really face poverty. It's such a loaded word, and it comes with a huge stigma. The semiotic thickness of that word draws up images of homelessness and deprivation at a level I can't even claim to understand. But a very simple Google search of definitions threw up that a lone parent of 1 child is in poverty if they have less than £190 a week after housing costs. I have 4 children, and I couldn't find a statistic for that. So much as I don't identify with the word, from a political standpoint, my children and I have spent the last 2 years experiencing poverty. I'm so fortunate that there's a happy ending to my scenario, but as I come out the other side, I can reflect upon how it was to look down the barrel of that particular smoking gun, and how many people I know that are still stuck there. And then I got to thinking about why I didn't want to talk about it some more. And I identified that I still feel ashamed of ever having been in that place. It's exactly that sense of shame and embarrassment and reluctance to speak out that keeps the epidemic of poverty hidden. I am articulate enough to be able to talk about it, And I know deep down that I didn't bring this set of circumstances upon myself, so I shouldn't feel ashamed to talk about it. And I do hope that in speaking out, I speak for many of the people and families I've met through my work with the community hubs. Here's my story. At the start of 2020, I was running a very busy childcare setting, employing staff, and had recently built a purpose-built premises in my garden. I'm a single mum to 4 amazing children, then aged between 5 and 13. My marriage had failed a few years previously, and although their dad's very much in the picture, they primarily reside with me. I had the usual financial arrangements, a car loan, a credit card, and I still had some left on the loan I'd taken out to build the playroom. Then the pandemic hit. This was the start of a whole series of events that spiraled in ways I couldn't have imagined, the sum total of which meant I was forced to shut up shop with no option to reopen. At the same time, my eldest son began experiencing mental health issues. And together, we started navigating some very difficult pathways, with him being assessed for psychosis and being a huge risk to himself through self-harming and suicidal ideation. No parent wants to see their child hurting, and the fear of losing them so close and real every day. Naturally, he became my priority, and starting any new business became impossible. As a single parent, isolated by the pandemic and on the shielded list, this was a very bleak time. But all the while, I needed to keep us afloat and support the needs of the rest of my children. I am blessed with a hugely supportive family, but they aren't local and spread far and wide across the country. Not having another adult around to give me a hug and share the worry was hard. With no income and no way to look for work, which was pretty non-existent in 2020, the full responsibility for the bills, I turned to our benefit system for the first time in my life. I was so lucky in that I had savings, and that enabled me to pretty much pay off all my loans. And I was able to borrow money from my family to pay off the rest. This is hugely significant. If I hadn't have been able to do this, we wouldn't still have our home, and that's a fact. I did the sums, changed the mortgage to interest only, cancelled all the unnecessary outgoings. Kids were livid to lose Netflix and Amazon, but the child maintenance paid by my children's father and the universal credit, after housing costs and all the bills, I had about £500 a month. It doesn't take a lot of maths to see how far below that arbitrary line we were at. I honestly believed that I'd be able to find work easily. I saw this as a temporary measure and something that we'd get through. I'm a graduate. I have a lot of experience, different things, never for a moment anticipated how hard it would be to find a job. I became a very savvy shopper, but still began to see how little I can actually provide for us. To start with, it wasn't too bad. I'd stock cupboards full of larder ingredients, herbs, spices, sauces, everything that makes food appetizing and appealing. I'm a good cook. I can cook from scratch and know what to do with fresh ingredients. But as time went on and the stock cupboards started to dwindle, I hit the same dilemma that I see time and time again. If you've £5 and £5 only to create a meal, and that's genuinely all you have, if you need to start buying stock cubes, herbs, spices, garlic, onions, the kind of condimentation you previously took for granted as always having in a cupboard, you are stuffed. So you're left with the dilemma of cooking something that's inevitably going to be really bland and unappealing, or opting for something pre-made and processed. Watching our diet became more processed was hugely depressing. And the addition of fruit and porridge oats, we were satisfied and it was okay. But then the kids needed new uniform and shoes. And then the car went wrong. And then the washing machine broke and the food mixer blew up. And the kids had a letter about a school trip and swimming lessons. I was able to arrange a mortgage holiday. And with the help of that and my overdraft facility, we kept on going. See how lucky I am. I had this additional safety net. But I was glimpsing how quickly things can unravel and how quickly the food bills actually become the least of your worries. I stopped sleeping very well, the 3 a.m. horrors becoming a nightly event. I'm not ashamed to say that I started on some pretty strong antidepressants at this time and still take to this day. Not ideal, but necessary. I was spending literally hours every day looking for work online. The job centre would ring me up for weekly updates and refer me to a company called Restart, which is a privately run company that the government franchise work search applicants to. It is not fit for purpose. The system is broken. And to be able to see the money wasted on the system whilst watching myself and people I know struggling to make every penny count, well, that felt like an additional kick in the teeth. My son was still very poorly at this point, but nothing that was recognised as a barrier to me working. Plus, I did want to work. The main problem was that there's absolutely no after-school childcare provision for my younger children, then only 5 and 9. I have no family locally, and so any job I took had to include me having the ability to take my children to school and collect them. I repeated this over and over and over and over again and never got anybody to hear me, or more likely believe me. I kept being told that universal credit would help pay for childcare, but how, when that childcare simply isn't available? The school has 2 childminders, both oversubscribed, both with long waiting lists. I was put forward for jobs that were completely impossible for me to do, but unless I attended the interview, my benefits would be sanctioned. So I attended and inevitably had to refuse the odd job offer because there was no flexibility. Then the £20 uplift was removed. I'd never at any point been told that my initial benefit calculation included this uplift. I found out about it through the media. So its removal was a shock. If I'm honest, I didn't really think that our government could be that cruel. Such was my faith in some kind of realistic justice, ill-placed as it turns out. At the same time that fuel costs were rising and my hopes of employment were becoming bleaker, I lost over £80 of my already tight £500 a month of available income. By the time this winter hit, I was honestly the most frightened I've ever been. I was forced to borrow money, and thank God I was able to do that off my family and not have to look elsewhere. I accepted a 0-hour contract role with a pharmaceutical company, something else that was franchised out, delivering COVID vaccinations. I had to do a massive amount of online and unpaid training to get to the point that I could accept shifts, but around Christmas I did have a little bit of work. But as is life with 0-hour contracts, they cancelled all shifts overnight and I've not had a single one since. Christmas this year was hard. The 3 a.m. horrors were over how I could find even the most basic of gifts for my children, and how to explain to a 7-year-old that Santa wouldn't be bringing much. Everything I was able to get had to serve a practical purpose, so dressing gowns, blankets and hoodies to keep warm, replace video games and dolls' houses, and I had to ask my mum to help with that. The new year got me a job, and I'm now working at Stroud Subrooms and absolutely loving it. A truly wonderful place and an ethical employer. Shameless plug, please support them. They're ace. We're on the way up, and I'm finally able to see some light at the end of the tunnel. This isn't a woe is me presentation. I am so blessed and so lucky. It's taught my children lots about the difference between the cost and value of things, and I have had so many factors that stop this becoming a horror story. A supportive family, an ex-husband that pays reliable and regular maintenance, and the education and ability to budget, to get creative and find solutions, a bucket load of that grisly stuff resilience. More importantly, I've had the unbounded love and affection from my children, who have kept me smiling and constantly remind me money isn't everything, plus a network of wonderful friends and family. Without any one of these things, and they aren't things that lots of people have, without a single one of those factors, I can completely see how quickly I would have unraveled further, how easy it would have been to fall into an addiction to numb the pain, or to make bad choices born out of desperation. If it weren't for my family and my children, my only option would have been to start with other forms of loans, or being forced to sell the house and the last shred of stability for the children. Being on the job market has shown me how disadvantaged a primary carer within a family is, and how this exponentially increases if you're single. The work search system is broken and doesn't accommodate for the roles and responsibilities of a primary parent. It's nothing short of a system of pointless soul-sapping box ticking with the constant threat of benefit sanctions. Poverty is more about being is more than about being hungry or cold. A lot of the time, this is the least of it. It's about watching your child cry because you haven't got the money for them to join their friends for a bowling game or a cinema trip. It's about feeling ashamed that you sent them to another birthday party with a rubbish gift. It's about waking up at 3 a.m. and not being able to get back to sleep because the weather forecast is predicting snow and you know that the most you can turn the heating on for is an hour. It's about scrapping the much-loved Sunday roast because having the oven on for 2 hours is costing too much and boiling pasta's quicker. It's about not being able to accept invites from friends to meet for coffee because you can't justify the cost. And it's about feeling ashamed to give the true reason as well, because you know your friends will want to buy the coffee for you and you can't cope with how that makes you feel. It's lonely, and it's soul destroying, and it's happening to millions across this country and plenty in this town. I'm living proof that a lot of the time you won't even know. Such is the stigma and the shame. The bright smile and the positive outlook masking it all, because the final loss would be self-respect. And that's something that above all else you can't afford to lose. It's about feeling like a second-class citizen every time you turn on the news or open a news article. It's about groups of friends hastily caveating a flippant conversation about benefit scroungers with, "Oh, we don't mean you." It's about hiding it at all costs. And that's why so many people assume that they aren't walking among people who are experiencing poverty. I feel able to talk about it now, only because I finally found that holy grail, a job in which my employers understand that I have to be at the school gate at 3:20. I'm able to agree that my eldest boy can go on a PGL trip, and now I can afford it. More importantly, I've been able to afford to pay for the counselling he's needed for so long, and is no closer to the front of the epic waiting list for NHS treatment. I can feel myself coming out the other side and better able to reflect on how close we came to disaster and thank the stars aligned that stopped it happening. But I see those still suffering. I see those whose circumstances are far more dire than mine ever were. It's why I feel so dedicated to work to ensure there is always food, and more importantly, friendship and support available for people without questions asked. It's also why I want it to be recognised that nobody on benefit is on benefits because they're lazy or it's an easy way out. The system is barely adequate. It will just about keep you alive, but not much else. Again, I had the benefit of good housing, economical heating and insulation. As we enter this period of massive inflation and a huge increase in fuel costs, I can see that the benefit system is going to go from being barely adequate to entirely inadequate. And the outcome of that is terrifying for our society. I have seen firsthand how precarious life can be, and know that we can't possibly know what's around the corner. It's made me all the more passionate about the importance of community and support networks that are there without judgment. We've lost a lot of that infrastructure for that in the way that modern life has become. I feel that it now needs to become a conscious decision to try and recreate local communities, and that hubs are a great start for this. The inadequacies of our welfare system are not going to be fixed until we can get a change of leadership, and even then it will likely take too long. What we can do to affect change is firstly acknowledge that poverty isn't something happening elsewhere. It's truly everywhere and within all walks of life, although inevitably some more than others. What we can do is look around us and see what can be done in our own communities to help each other, to come together and to find strategies and networks that can make things easier, but mostly to eradicate the shame and recognizing that it could happen to any one of us. Thank you.
Wow, Lynsey, that was such a beautiful, thank you so much for sharing. That was a really, I mean, obviously very difficult and hard time for you, and we just really appreciate that you feel like you can share that with us, because I think it's a huge learning opportunity for everyone. You're right, it can happen to anybody. I think it's something like 60% of adult population are just like 2 paychecks away from being homeless, because like you said, possibly they don't have that family support, or they don't have that savings that you know, amazingly had that you could use. But that doesn't take away from the experience that you had, and also absolutely, as you've described, the complete inadequacy of the system, and also the mess that it is, and how it is so impossible to navigate. And I always think about, I mean, you said at the beginning you're a graduate and you can X, Y, or Z, but I think if you had English as a second language, or if you struggled to read, or if you or had a disability or a learning disability, then these things get, you know, exponentially harder. And so yeah, just thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure that there will be loads of questions that come through for you for the Q&A at the end, but yeah, we just really appreciate you taking your time and joining us tonight, and a fantastic, really super personal start to the session tonight, which I think whatever we talk about, policy, strategy, this is the reality for people. And like Lynsey said, this this is not just a thing of the pandemic. This was happening way before that as well, and to millions and millions of people. And yeah, I mean, a symptom of a political system that has like gutted public services and absolutely left so many people completely alone. So thank you very much for kicking us off, Lynsey. Okay, so our next speaker is Nathan Rowe, who is the chair of Middle of the Hill Community Group in Stroud, which is centered around, forgive me for this pronunciation, Nounsels?
Absolutely right.
Absolutely right, amazing, Nounsels Cross, and the surrounding areas. And the community group has been a thriving food hub for and support for neighbours who may be experiencing food poverty, and playing their role in trying to one, curate a community, but also support people and also help people understand about reducing food waste as well. Okay, thank you very much, Nathan.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, I don't need to say anything now. You said it all for me, Jenny. So thank you very much for asking me to say a few words this evening. I think it was suggested about 10 minutes or so. If I do go on, because I have a tendency to do so, do just get the virtual crook out and pull me.
I'll give you a wave, don't worry.
Pull me off the stage, that's absolutely fine. So yes, my name's Nathan and I'm from Middle of the Hill Community Group. Middle of the Hill, I don't think you'd ever find Middle of the Hill on a map anywhere. It's kind of, we've named it Middle of the Hill, but as Jenny says, it's sort of primarily centered around Nounsels Cross, which if you can picture, if you go up Bisley Old Road, going uphill, on the left there's 2 blocks of flats, not the most attractive of buildings particularly, but a really strong community in Nounsels Cross. And the sort of area of the community group also includes part of Bisley Old Road, part of Summer Street and Middle Hill itself. So actually it represents a very mixed community actually, lots of different people, lots of different backgrounds, different things going on in their lives, and I think there were sort of lots of people who perhaps never would have, don't often meet each other because they have very different lifestyles and they're doing different things with their lives. So it's quite diverse and maybe a little bit of sort of them and us kind of thing, not sort of actively, but subconsciously. And the community group's been running for years, long before I moved to Stroud and got involved. I think probably about 20 years or so. And I've been involved with the community group maybe for about 8 years or so. And on this call as well is Denise Knowlson, who's the secretary for Middle of the Hill Community Group. And we're a small committee of about 10 or so. But actually we've got about 25 volunteers who all help to run the food hub, a few of whom are on the call this evening, Adrian and Nora, perhaps 1 or 2 others that I haven't spotted, and Denise. If I miss anything, you think, well, why didn't he say that? Just chip in, D. I won't mind at all. So about a year ago, the community group tentatively, we had a discussion and we said, well, because I heard lots on the radio particularly during the lockdown, and I had a bit more time to listen to the radio about projects that were going on using surplus food from supermarkets, and we're sort of hearing more and more about the amount of food that gets wasted, and more and more about food poverty. And a few of us on the committee got together and thought, well, is this something we could do, something we could play a part in to support our community? And we always had a dual aim, actually, of both supporting people who may be experiencing food insecurity, but also the aim of reducing food waste and surplus. So we had a little powwow together. We thought, well, we probably could. And we thought, well, we'll start small because we didn't want to overstretch ourselves, because there's only certain amounts of capacity that we could do. And of course, the people on the committee are a very mixed group as well. So there were people who were facing all sorts of challenges in terms of employment, all the issues going on with the pandemic, caring responsibilities. I have a full-time job. Members of the committee were shielding. So we thought, well, we can't overstretch ourselves here. There's only a certain amount we can actually do, and we didn't want to sort of grow too fast and then it go pop, but also not create something that people maybe came to really rely on and value that we couldn't sustain, because that wouldn't be fair on anybody. So we started really small and we looked into what we could do, and then so we made a link with Fair Share Southwest, who support groups and supermarkets with the distribution of surplus food. And because we were an existing community group with an infrastructure already there, it was easy for us to sort of build on what we already had. We already had a constitution, we have a little community room, which is tiny, but it does the job, small but perfectly formed. So we had premises, we had public liability insurance, we had some structure already, so that helped. I'm aware of other community groups, like the Top of Town community group, for example, that started from absolutely from scratch during the last sort of year or two. So we had a fair wind behind us, and we were already well known with the district council and the town council, who have been incredibly supportive actually of everything that we've done, and we were able to access some grant funding to help with some of the startup costs. We need to get a fridge and a freezer and that sort of thing, and increase our public liability insurance. So we started very tentatively with a Thursday morning collection from Pagan Hill Tesco Express, and that very first morning, just a little over a year ago, we went and collected a little bag of croissants and and old bread, and opened our doors to the community room, and like maybe 1 or 2 people came in. It really has grown quite significantly, and we open now 3 times a week. And we have between 25 to 30 people coming through the door each time we're open, and we've expanded where we get our food from. So we have a collection from Tesco's, big Tesco's as I call it, collection from Waitrose, which is always lovely because you get really nice food, and actually it's I'll come on to that, and also thanks to our friends at the Trinity Rooms who coordinate this, we get the benefit of the donations made by the traders at the farmers market and people who shop in the farmers market, who buy an extra item and pop it in a basket. So we get the benefit of that as well. And we also collect from Greggs, and we get lots of pastries from them. And particularly with the farmers market stuff, it was really nice that we're able to offer people really good quality, locally grown, ethically produced food, rather than tons and tons of cheap white bread that has little nutritional value, and everything covered in the yellow stickers, and because it's short dated, and of course wrapped in plastic as well. So it's nice in terms of the dignity of the experience of coming to the food hub, that there's really good quality food that people may not otherwise be able to access. But we've always been very mindful, however, of needing to wanting to provide the visitors with what they want to eat and what they find most useful to eat. So it's not about us wanting to impose our values of what we think people should be eating. We sort of want people to be able to have what they want to eat. We learned really quickly that lots of people weren't really able to cook with the food that we were getting, that we were offering, because people didn't always have money on the electric meter, didn't always have cookers. A lot of people say they don't have cookers, or not been able to sort of afford to repair the cookers, or they've recently been housed in the flats and haven't been able to get the money together. So there's a lot of pot noodles go on there, but it's about what people can, what people need. And increasingly, we've been able to cook with some of the food that we collect as well. Denise and a few of the other volunteers have gone through the process of registering their kitchen with environmental health, training some of the volunteers up in basic food hygiene. So we've been able to cook with the surplus food and make up lovely little frozen meals that go alongside the meals that we had from the long table. We've been partnering with the long table from the beginning, so that people, who maybe don't either don't have the confidence or the experience of cooking, or the tools with which to do it, excuse me, are able to sort of be able to pick up a lovely nutritious meal that's actually been cooked by their neighbours. And the whole essence of the food hub is about neighbours supporting neighbours. And when I put a little call out for who wants to be involved in helping with the food hub, I kind of had some of the people come forward that I might expect would come forward. And actually it was people with quite a lot of social capital and confidence who volunteered, and we had 5 volunteers or so. But as time went on and people got to know the food hub, got to know the people that were in there, and how it worked, and that trust developed, because there is stigma, isn't there, on people do feel some stigma about coming along to a food hub, even though it's super uber friendly and accessible and run by neighbours and that sort of thing. But over time, as people got to know us and the trust built up, not only do we see more and more people coming through the door, but actually people who were experiencing food inequality at times were also wanting to get involved to run the food hub as well. And that created a greater sense of ownership, I think, particularly amongst the people who live in the flats at Outsource Cross. So we were really proud and pleased about that. So we have a really, really diverse mixture of visitors and volunteers. So people come because they want to support food waste reduction and to support the community group, as much as perhaps experiencing food inequality as well. And we have a little donation tin that people drop money in. And actually we do, all the food is completely free where it needs to be. But we do encourage everybody to sort of drop a few coins in if they can, because the food has value and the work of the community group and the volunteers has value. And, even if it's just a few pennies, people want to do it. If they can, they want to put the money in. And actually in doing that, not only helps with our overheads, because we have public liability insurance, we need to keep the lights on, but actually we are able to use the money that comes in to buy items that don't often become surplus. So things like the tins of beans and pot noodles don't often always become surplus. So we're able to buy things that we know people need. We've got a really good link with a local organisation who keep us well supplied with pet food, because we were being asked a lot, have you got any cat food, got any dog food? People would describe it, they would say, well, I make sure the dog's fine first. A bit like you would have had children, I suppose, you'd make sure the children were fed first. And we thought, well, actually, you're going without because you want to feed your pet. Then we realised it was really important to have a good supply of pet food. And then as we were going through, we were learning more and more. We became more alive to the issues around hygiene poverty, and how much of an issue that is. And there's an organisation called National Hygiene Bank, and we got in touch with them to find out whether we could access hygiene products and that sort of thing. We found well, there wasn't a branch of the hygiene bank in Stroud, so we thought, well, we'll be that then, we'll do that. So Middle of the Hill Community Group is the Stroud branch of the hygiene bank. So when people go and do their shopping, they can go into Boots in the high street and pop in a shower gel or anything, a bit like in the supermarkets where you can sort of put a tin in for the food bank. The things don't have to be bought in Boots, you can buy them anywhere. And so we go and collect the items from the donation box in Boots, which we use in our food hub, but also we sometimes get very large allocations of the toiletries and cleaning products directly from the hygiene bank, which we then distribute amongst the other food hubs in Stroud. So we work in a close collaboration as a small network with Lynsey and the Uplands Food Hub, at the top of town food hub, which operate at the top of Bisley Old Road from the old Parliament Primary School as was, and the Pagan Hill Community Group and the Trinity Rooms. So working as that small collaborative network, we're able to share sort of experiences, skills, expertise, and labour, and that really does help us. Having a quick look down through my list, make sure I'm saying all sorts of things I wanted to say. Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm doing quite well, I think. We are. I've lost my thread now. Before I came onto this call, I had a quick look at our Fair Share app, because when you you have this little app thing that lets you know when there's food to be collected and that sort of thing, and it tracks the impact that you've had. Now, much of the impact we've had you can't measure, but in terms of the amount of food that we've collected and the amount of food therefore that hasn't gone to waste, and the impact on CO2 savings and that sort of thing. This only really, just going to give you some numbers now, but this only really is a very small amount because it doesn't include the stuff that we get from farmers market and other sources. But in the year we've been running, we've collected nearly 5 kilograms of food. 5 kilograms, would that be right? No, that's a very small amount, isn't it? 5 kilograms? I may have misread that. I'll open it up again. 5,000 kilograms.
I was just going to say, Nathan, it's just over 5,000 kilograms.
Yeah. I used to be a teacher, but I was never a maths teacher. 5,000 kilograms of food that we've saved from going to waste. Nearly 12,000, which is the equivalent of nearly 12,000 meals, and CO2 savings of nearly 16,000 kilograms. But to say that really is only a very small amount. I mean, the other impact in terms of the community cohesion and strengthening the links between neighbours that live, as I say, in a very diverse part of town. I mean, that is immeasurable. People who've never met each other before have had the chance to do so, links have formed, trust has developed, and maybe people that you may not have naturally sort of thought you had anything in common with, so that's been really, really good. And actually, as we all know, when you've got a stronger community with greater community cohesion, you see a reduction in antisocial behaviour, and our links with the neighbourhood policing team are very strong, and they see the work of the community group and the food hub as being quite pivotal really in developing that a safer, stronger community around Nelson's Cross and the immediate area. Now, Dee, is there anything else you think you might have said that I didn't?
I'll just add in, because someone's asked the question in the chat.
I wasn't looking at that.
That's all right. Anything else?
Don't worry, we'll ask all the questions at the end as well, so that, because a lot of them come through and are relevant to a lot of the speakers, so that we can,
if you just a particular bit about do anything else apart from the food related ones. We do also have a very active gardening group, community gardening group, which is very self-managing. We're lucky we've got a qualified horticulturist who kind of takes the lead on that for us. And they've done some brilliant work over the last year, and have got more exciting plans for this spring, which is fantastic. We're also hoping to try and get some more computer support going this year, if we can get the funding we're applying for to do that. So yeah, there are more things we want to do. Unfortunately, although we're great with security of tenure because the council give us that room, which is brilliant, it is tiny, so we're quite limited in what we can do space wise. We'd like to do lots more, but yeah, we get community police officer. We've got really strong links with them. They come up a lot. P3 have been up. We try and get other organisations to come up and do drop-in sessions. We had the NHS up today, yesterday, handing out LFT tests to everybody. So yeah, we do what we can.
Thank you. And one of the sort of main things that we really want to develop is more of a community cafe type feel to the place. So when people come to collect food, I mean, people do already stop and chat, and we put the kettle on and that sort of thing. But we've always been very nervous about that with the risk assessments around COVID and that sort of thing. But, you know, as we move on, hopefully we can have more sort of people stopping and, you know, when they come and collect some food, cakes, croissants, that sort of thing, well, sit and have that with your neighbours, you know, rather than people taking food away to their homes and sort of eating it. I would be very, I should stop in a minute because I know we need to move on, but I should be very pleased if Adrian and Nora, if there's anything you wanted to just add as people involved with the community group and the food hub, do feel free, you don't really have to. But if they can, in terms of any experiences as a volunteer, I put them on the spot there, which maybe a little bit unfair.
I mean, we can hear from Adrian and Nora, was it, at the end as well. So we'll invite people from the audience to come and ask questions and speak as well. So thank you so much, Nathan. And
that's really okay. I hope that gave us sort of a bit of a flavour that maybe we're hoping to achieve of what we've been doing in a very small way in this little bit of Stroud.
Definitely, and I think that especially stemming from the pandemic, there's been a lot of these hubs and community groups that have popped up all over the country that are meeting the need that is absolutely there, that our government is failing to fill. And, you know, people who have similar stories to Lynsey will use those sorts of community groups as a lifeline. So I think it's really amazing work, and amazing that you have such a good group of volunteers working there, and also really wonderful the sort of unexpected symptoms that come from these things, like a better connected community, like less antisocial behavior, etc., etc. So let's hear from our next speaker. But thank you so much, Nathan. Really appreciate you joining us. So our next speaker is Jade Bashford, who works for the Real Farming Trust on a UK-wide practical and research project to address food poverty and food sovereignty, and has worked on equality and community building for the last 30 years, looking for practical systemic solutions to injustice with people like the Soil Association and Community Land Advisory Service, and is now a core member of the Stroud community, I believe. So let us know and tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, Jade. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, yeah, I live in Stroud, so I'm involved in some of the community groups around Stroud. So we thought we'd have this meeting for 3 reasons, really. One is to share information about what's happening. That poverty in Stroud is really rocketing, as it is elsewhere, but for the reasons Lynsey explained, it's under the radar, but for reasons of shame, and because it becomes harder to participate once you're in that situation. And as Nathan said, because sometimes you're in a separate bubble, it can go really unseen, even though it's on your doorstep. So yeah, one reason for having this meeting was to talk about the extent of poverty in Stroud, and also the causes, and why it matters, the consequences, the kinds of things Lynsey was talking about. And to think about the response we might make in Stroud. And also to have more of a voice, so the responses we're starting to hear about from Nathan, and Nathan's representing one of many food hubs around Stroud, each distinct and really in a really fantastic way doing with rather than doing to the neighbourhood groups. So there's yeah, so they've made a really fantastic start. I think there's scope for a lot more of those kinds of hubs. There's still a vast unmet need. But the way that they're working to build community and to be inclusive and to think about all the things that go around people's difficulty, yeah, it's working really well. So that's starting to happen well in Stroud. But when I hear Lynsey, and yeah, she's not by any means alone. There's a lot of Lynseys in Stroud. I just feel really angry. I feel really angry. It's not necessary and it's not acceptable, it's not in any way caused by personal ineptitude. That it requires an enormous amount of resourcefulness to get by in that situation. So what's missing, I think, in Stroud is a policy or a campaign voice to go alongside the practical work that's going on. At the end, I think we'll ask whether anybody wants to assemble again to talk about whether we might add that to what's happening in Stroud, to see whether people want to talk about making a campaign voice to go alongside the practical work. So we'll also, I think at the end, I think this is right, Jenny, we're going to make a way for people to make a donation to the food hubs at the end. Is that correct? Yeah, we will. So we'll talk about that at the end. And if you want to, you can ask us about how to volunteer for one of the food hubs and where to take food. And as Nathan said, a really simple thing you can do if you shop at the farmer's market, you can buy something extra at the farmer's market and you can leave it at the Four Seasons shop. So you can bring some more food into the food hubs. All right, so Martin asked several people from the council if they could speak tonight and nobody was free. So I'm going to just briefly, I think, try and talk about the extent of poverty in Stroud. I'm going to share a slide. I think it might be the only boring slide all evening. I apologise for doing a boring slide. But if we're going to talk about the extent of poverty, I thought we'd have some numbers. So I'm going to share my screen now. To the only boring slide of the evening. Here we go. Is it going to work? I'm doing, there we go. All right. So these are national statistics. There's loads of reports with these kinds of numbers in. You can let me know if you actually need to see them. But so about 8% of the UK population experienced food poverty last year. And as Lynsey said, really, food poverty isn't a thing, it's poverty. So if someone's coming forward because they're unable to pay for the food that they need, that's an indication of what's going on in every other area of life as well. There isn't a separate fuel poverty or a separate furniture poverty or a separate period poverty. Poverty's poverty. But it happens to be the thing I know about is food, so I'm talking about food. So if you can imagine, if you live in an average street, which of course none of us do, but supposing you did, then that means 1 in every 10 houses has got the kind of situation that Lynsey's talking about. It's so widespread that it's kind of normal. It's not evenly spread. So about 19% of black-led households, 41% of houses with 3 or more children experience food poverty. And many of them feeling the kind of shame that Lynsey described, despite the fact that it's normal. Yeah, so it's very unevenly spread. So about 6% of the households referred to a food bank had somebody with a disability in the household. 24%, nearly a quarter of couples with children were referred to a food bank last year, many of them working. So the figures are enormous. It's not temporary. I talked to the food bank in Redruth last week. I went to Brighton Food Bank last week. I spoke to the food bank in Coventry, and they're all saying the same thing, that it used to be that it was an emergency situation to deal with the benefit sanction or the 5-week wait for universal credit. But now they don't really know what to do because it's ongoing. The income just doesn't cover the bills. It's not a crisis, it's not a temporary situation, it's a permanent situation for a growing number of people. And alongside the people who are already having the experience of not managing, of having to go to the food bank, of going through all the kind of horrors that Lynsey described, there's a great many more people who are almost there, who are anxious. It won't take much. It's changing the interest rate, the rent going up, they're on the brink of it. So I think the ballpark figures would be about right for Stroud on those slides, those national figures. Stroud's not in the bottom half for deprivation in the UK as an area, but parts of Stroud are. So Stonehouse and Cam, for example, are in the bottom 10% for disadvantaged in the country. And in fact, I think if you're in poverty in Painswick or a posh village, actually, it might be more difficult for you in certain ways. So I think really for all of us, there will be many of our neighbours within walking distance who are experiencing the kind of things Lynsey's described, and we won't know about it. If you need the figures for Stroud, they're in that link below. I expect you can share the slides if you want to look at what's actually happening in Stroud. And the kinds of consequences, as well as the immediate kind of day-to-day situation that Lynsey described for her family, there's some really all-round sort of really shocking outcomes in terms of education, in terms of mental health. Here, this figure for physical health, there's a 10-year difference in life expectancy. There's a 19-year difference in healthy life expectancy if you live in a disadvantaged area compared to a wealthy area. It's a really shocking inequality that's really sort of baked into the situation now. Trying to stop share, can I do that? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so we just wanted to bring it to people's attention that this is happening under the radar, not very visible in Stroud, and increasing sharply. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say for now, and I think Robin's going to talk to us next about how we might make a policy response to talk about the causes of poverty, as well as addressing the sort of immediate needs that come forward as a result of it. Thanks, Robin, for zooming in from far away from Stroud.
Thank you, Jade. Really appreciate your input. And I think you're right. I think this is a theme that's gone through a lot of the panelists session, is that that these things are hidden, that we're seeing it bubbling on the surface now, but that there's a whole lot going on underneath the surface as well that has been going on for a long time, and that needs addressing. And that it's amazing that these community action groups are popping up everywhere to support their local communities, but that there's a massive need that is unmet in certain areas. But also, I think, which Robin might talk to us about, is how that community-based action on the ground needs to be supported by policy and strategic thinking and funding and money in the bottom line. Okay, so Robin Burgess is with us, who's worked in charities and public sector for over 40 years. Most of that is charity CEO or in policy and strategy work related to poverty, addiction, homelessness, and quality improvement in the NHS. But apparently is absolutely his happiest when working on the front line, delivering the services that people need to them. But I'm sure he will tell us a lot more about that. And after Lynsey's 4 children job, I think working in the NHS is absolutely second. So thank you very much for joining us, Robin, and your 10 minutes starts now.
Okay, hi, you're all brilliant speakers so far, and some inspiring work clearly happening in Stroud to meet the needs of people like Lynsey's. And thank you very much, Lynsey, for sharing your story. I'm here tonight to represent the Equality Trust, which I put into the chat. So links to what we do if people don't know who we are. I'm not employed by the Equality Trust, but I'm active in the local group in the Northampton area, West Northamptonshire. But my day job is running a very large charity which works in the areas that Jenny has just described. But I was asked to cover this tonight because the regional or other local group organizer was unable to be here. And she wanted to give you a taste of what local groups can do working within the Equality Trust umbrella. Because as others have said already, Jade said in particular, it is great to do the work that people like Nathan and Dee do, and I do very similar things in terms of providing all that kind of food support and other support to people on the ground who are suffering. But there is another dimension that we can actively engage as well. And it's a tension, isn't it, about how much we want to be involved in campaigning work alongside the alleviation of the poverty that we see all around us. And inevitably, a lot of us will want to focus upon that because we can see that we can make a difference. And that's the only reason why food poverty has become such a thing, is because people feel they can do something by getting food and giving it to people. If we could get houses and give them to people, there will be such a thing as housing poverty. It is, as Jade says, all poverty. And obviously, the natural inclination for all of us is to get involved and provide services and try and help people in need. But is it enough? Should we and can we and could we do more? And I'm thinking here in terms of explicitly being involved in campaigning activity. And the Equality Trust provides one way of doing so from a non-party political perspective, because there's always the risk that if you campaign from within a political perspective of one party or another, and I'm not knocking the Green Party in this or any other party, but you can be perceived by those in power who may run a council as being doing this for party political reasons. So there's a very good argument for trying to do campaigning outside of any party political umbrella. And we do that in Northampton. I'm not connected to any political party, but by working incredibly closely with politicians of all types, we can get change and lead to change. So that's largely what the Equality Trust does. If I can share my screen for a moment, I will show you the other one of the two things that I've given you in the chat, which is the Equality Trust Fairness 15. Now, this is local stuff. This is a little kind of checklist for any local community group to work on. And what you have here is the Equality Trust Fairness 15. And these are just ideas for the kind of things you could do at a local level to campaign as well as to alleviate. So just scrolling down into this, the first 4 of the 15 that they cite here is work on fair pay, and talk about things like the real living wage. Now, my own organisation is accredited by the Real Living Wage Foundation, and we hold that mark on all our communications. And it sets out that we walk the walk as well as talk the talk about in terms of paying a decent pay. And this is something that any local group can campaign on with, for example, any anchor institutions within your local area, and in particular the local authority, to see if they can put this into their own pay systems. I would say my internet connection keeps warning me that I'm unstable. So if I do dip out, we're all about.
Yeah, you have just dropped out slightly. Maybe while you're sharing screen, if you turn your camera off, and then we should be able to hear you fine. Thanks.
Makes sense. Let me just do that. Okay, yeah, so here we have some fair policies, things like to evaluate the likely impact of council policies on inequality, do things like speed limits in residential areas, encourage the council to publish strategies to tackle local food poverty, fuel poverty, funeral poverty, and so on. I'm just showing these as examples because we could spend a lot of time talking about individual things that you may want to do within a local area. These are things about fair leadership, stuff like credit unions, and then it gives you some ideas. So what you've got here is a sort of menu for local action, which you can follow up in your own right afterwards, after this presentation. But it gives you a kind of illustration about what different Equality Trust groups do at a local level. But I'm going to talk very briefly about what we do in Northampton and what we've achieved, as well as all that provision, the kind of things that Nathan and Dee do. We have worked to bring together various alliances working on poverty of different types, including a food poverty alliance, which is made up of now something like 45 different food banks and food aid providers who all work together to lobby and campaign and to promote issues of poverty in our area to the local council. And we have achieved representation at a very high level within their thinking. And by keep chipping away at elected members from all parties and being seen as not connected to any one party, we've been able to make really significant political changes in the new unitary authority of West Northants. For example, we're involved in the writing of an anti-poverty strategy at the highest level within the kind of 5 people who work on it. And we've ensured that it fully encourages the development of active strategies to tackle poverty within this area, backed by funding. In the last year, we've secured something like nearly £1 million worth of funding derived from central government to tackle food and other poverty, which I've been actively involved in the distribution and management of. So it's been run through my own charity, Hope, and we have allocated that funding to a whole wealth of local community groups. And they gave us that money because they trusted us to make a real difference. But we've also been doing some work on mapping local poverty and conducted a very detailed review of poverty in our area. And that forms the basis of a report, which goes to the council next week, in fact, at a public launch, which we're hosting, which is 27,000 words of lived experience and community awareness and knowledge of what the local problems are, which will then form the major part of the ongoing action plan on poverty locally. Now, we wouldn't have done all this had we not been actively engaged from within with local politicians and getting them to trust us that we were not banging the drum for one political party against another. And even within my own board of the Hope charity, we have a very active engagement from a number of Conservative politicians, for example. They're the ruling group locally. And having them in there has enabled us to really change hearts and minds within perhaps the party that perhaps is perceived as being the least interested in these issues. And where did that lead? When the universal credit cut, as we can call it, the reduction of the £20 was announced by central government, West Northamptonshire Unitary Authority was, I believe, the only Conservative authority to write publicly to government to condemn the cut of £20 in universal credit. So you can make changes by working within the system and lead to and encourage people to think differently about issues of poverty. I'm not going to go into the detail because I don't know Stroud in the way that you do. I'm not from there. Jade put up some figures. But the point I will make is that there is poverty and there is super poverty. And by that, I mean that as well as all the people who are on low incomes through universal credit and all the rest, there is also likely to be, although they may be in small numbers, a group of people in an even greater level of poverty, people who are affected by homelessness, by no recourse to public funds status, by immigration law, and whatever it may be, who are in an even deeper level of poverty, even than people like Lynsey. And many of those people come from Black and Asian and other minority communities. And a lot of these people live in absolute destitution. And so the pressure to act on these things, not just to alleviate, but also to campaign, is beholden on all of us. We have to do more than just keep on, and this is with no disrespect because I do it every day, going and collecting the food from the supermarkets and giving it to the poorest. We must make changes by leading to political change, however we achieve it. So I will stop at that point.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you for bringing that different perspective to the table. I think you're right. These two sort of strategies for change go hand in hand. One is on the ground action based, but the other is definitely more strategic, pushing political parties, whichever side of the spectrum they sit on, to make positive change. And I think that that's what we should always be doing and will continue to do for a long time. I think some of the points that you raised around the practical steps that we can take locally to sort of tackle equality, alliances, which I think that Nathan sort of touched on, in that a lot of these hubs are now connecting with each other to create either a hub and spoke system or a sort of district-wide group to share skills, share people, share manpower, and also, as you mentioned, lobbying the local council. Obviously, everything that we talk about strategically needs to be backed up by funding, which is great that in your local area that happened. And I know Nathan as well mentioned in Stroud getting some grants from the council, which is great, but always needs to be more. And one thing you mentioned, I think, is really important, the need for mapping of what is going on, what the reality actually is, because we can all imagine what it looks like, but that doesn't, it really doesn't shine a light on what is actually going on. Like Lynsey said in her speech, you know, a smiling face and a positive attitude can cover a whole host of worries and concerns and nightmares that are going on underneath the surface. And so actually mapping out what it looks like across the district is a really useful and powerful tool. Amazing. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and sharing your experiences. And I know that the chat has been going crazy while you've all been talking, so I will have a quick look at that and see if I can find any questions. I'll ask one of the, I'll find a question. I'll invite the person who asked it to ask the question to the speakers, and then anyone can come in on that. So just pop your hand up, and we can and we can talk about this. So lots of wonderful supporting comments for Lynsey saying thank you. Lots of also links that have been shared. Okay. I mean, Adrian, I don't know if you wanted to say anything on yours. I think that yours was just sort of supporting Nathan. Unmute if you'd like to say anything. I know you're involved in this as well.
And the only thing I would add is that, and Nathan D can talk to this, is that they've got, as well as the food hub going, they've got a really nice area outside, and it is small, but they've managed to get funding for new decking and a cover as a community cafe. Nathan, do you want to sort of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, certainly. Thank you. Yes, because as I say, we are so small. We in our community room, and we want people to sort of, and it is filled with shelves and tables and things like that. It was really hard for, we wanted to get a couple of sorts of bistro style tables where people can stop and chat and that sort of thing. We had a very little sort of outdoor space that we thought, well, we need to redevelop that really. So D is excellent at doing funding applications, and we got £5,000 grant from the National Lottery. Their Places Called Home award. And as Adrian said, we were able to get some really great decking and a canopy for when, you know, it's a bit drizzly, for people to sit under. And actually it's been lovely because some people who live in the area are sort of magically coming out and sweeping it and tidying it, and you know, when a place looks nice, people take more care of it, don't they? And we have been very fortunate with various different sort of pots of funding, because I think we're able to illustrate that actually, you know, if we get a little bit of money to do the food hub, it's not only supporting food poverty, but actually all those wider benefits that ticks a number of boxes for funders as well. And actually, while I was talking, somebody knocked my door, a neighbour knocked my door and has bought me a bag of vegetables for the food hub. And I only mentioned that, it just kind of illustrates actually this is how, you know, people in the area say, well, I can't come down to the food hub as I'm working or something, but do you want this stuff? So yes, we've got that from a neighbour who works full time and can't come during the day. Amazing,
a wonderful example of the, like you say, community spirit and surplus food not going to waste. Okay, Tim, come in if you would like to come in.
Yeah, just firstly, thank you to everyone for sharing really kind of insight and inspiration in the session. I was really struck by some of the kind of equality 15 ideas and thinking about those ones we could, again, challenge different stakeholders locally, both our councils at district and county level, and also local businesses. Because it struck me it's not just minimum pay, but that flexible working piece, the kind of childcare piece, you know, those other services, and thinking about what, I guess the questions the panelists are, what are the couple of things you'd most like to be asking, whether county or district councils, to do more on, particularly supporting that kind of in-work poverty challenge as well as the absolute poverty challenges?
Thanks, Tim. Absolutely right. So, Robin, did you want to come in on that first?
Well, for me, it's getting them to accept that poverty is a local issue, wherever you are. That's where we started. And for us, local elections last year, we had all the parties there, and it was a specifically poverty hustings for people to speak at. And unexpectedly, the leader of the Conservative group said, I commit to launching a poverty strategy as a result of this thing. And so for me, that's where everything else follows. So the things like living factors all follow from that.
Thanks, Robin. I think you dropped out a little bit at the end there, but absolutely. Do any of our other speakers want to come in on that? What would you be demanding of or asking for from district and county level councils to do more to tackle inequality and to tackle poverty in the area? Jade?
I was just going to say, let's bring Sarah in as well at this point, because she's involved in one of the hubs too, and she's probably got some ideas to offer.
Yeah, if anyone in the audience want, just put their hand up and I will absolutely bring you in, just like Tim did. So just let us know what you think.
Shall I just have say something then? It's Sarah here. Yeah, there's one of the issues I think that we seem to have is that there is money sloshing around in the system, particularly post-COVID, and there are some organisations that are very good at writing grants to capture some of that funding for all kinds of data capturing and analysis of the situation. But actually the people that really need the resources are the people, the hubs themselves, who get so little funding because it just doesn't filter down. Of course, it's really important for us to really understand the full picture and to really understand, statistically what's going on, and also to map geographically what's going on. But there is a really important immediate need. It seems that people are funding organisations are very risk averse, so they want to be absolutely 100% sure that, the organisation is absolutely watertight. And when some of these hubs is first setting up, Lynsey at Uplands has done an amazing job, but they've got no resources at all. They've got no money. And it feels really frustrating that in order for these, really grassroots community-led initiatives have to fight tooth and nail and have to develop skills. Usually it's a few local individuals. They're not necessarily really skilled in grant application writing and things like that, but they're just doing essential work. So I would say that councils particularly need to be looking at being less risk averse and putting the resources in absolutely where they're needed at the coalface straight away.
Thanks, Sarah, for your input there. Great response to Tim's question. I don't know if any of our other speakers or members of the audience want to come in on this question. What should we be demanding of councils, local government, in order to tackle inequality in the area? If not, I think there's a lot of chat going. Oh, Jade, did you have a comment?
Yeah. Start. Yeah, I think probably a lot of the issues we need to tackle are actually national policy issues. They're to do with benefit levels, healthcare, housing, that kind of thing, that there's only so much a local authority can do, actually.
Absolutely right. Oh, Chloe, come in, and then Martin and Liz.
Hello, I just wanted to say that it's something that obviously we talk about a lot of the district council, but it was really great recently to hear these conversations starting up at the county council as well. We had a couple of hours the other day talking about the areas of where, you know, we've got multiple indices of deprivation, primarily in Gloucester and Cheltenham, but, you know, Keynes Cross, for example, is one of the areas in Stroud that has gone down a level, and the administration are actually organising a conference on local deprivation. I think it's going to happen in May time, so that will be really interesting to, I mean, I'm glad now to have the Fair 15, because I can use that to sort of structure my questioning at that conference. And I think Tim raises a really good point about, you know, some of the people that the council employs are some of these people who could quite easily, you know, they're on low incomes anyway, but in work, and could quite easily be tipped over. It would only take small things to go wrong at home before they could be needing some of the services that we've talked about tonight. So grateful to everyone who's talked tonight. It's been a really interesting session. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. And as our county councillor, I'm sure she'll be taking all these thoughts and comments back to that table. So next, Liz and or Martin.
Hi, thanks. And I mean, really fascinating discussion, really moving to hear what's happening locally. And clearly there's a lot that the local councils probably need to be more aware of. But, you know, as Jade, I think, just said, you know, that really need big changes at the national level. And I mean, sadly, I feel we're just at the tip of the iceberg at the moment. It's going to get an awful lot worse in the coming year, you know, so we're going to get, this is going to become a really critical issue. And I just wondered if any of the speakers want to sort of highlight what are the big asks that we should be making of central government to make sure that that as the economy gets goes into recession and costs go up, that really the poor are protected as much as possible.
Thanks, Martin. So I'll take Robin first, but I mean, also just Lynsey would really like to hear from you. What would you have wanted in your situation to have been better? Go to Robin first. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it would be great.
I didn't really hear much of that. I'm afraid I lost a lot of it. I was just going to say about this local national thing. You know, local parties lead up to national parties. If you can influence a group locally, you can influence them nationally. In my local authority area, we have 2 ministers, both cabinet now, who are the MPs for 2 of the 4 seats. A third seat is occupied by for agriculture and other things. If you can influence people locally, they will speak to their friends in national government. You can influence. They are not separate.
Okay, thank you so much, Robin. Definitely, I have no doubt that the people of Stroud give Siobhan Bale a very good amount of emails and phone calls and content to tell her exactly how we feel about her national government's policies. Any of our other speakers want to come in? I think while we're waiting, just like a very shameless green policy plug, but I know that for me nationally, what should be happening is retrofitting policies. We should be making council houses warmer. We should be making the infrastructure that is already there as good as it possibly can be in order to make heating homes cheaper, to make public transport cheaper, to you know, make sure that the food on the table is locally sourced as wherever possible, and make sure I think there's been a lot of chat around you know, the access to healthy food and the energy that we need in order to live in this convenience-based life that we currently find ourselves, the energy that we need from the food that we get only can really be fulfilled by a properly balanced diet. So making sure that people have access to that. It was really great to hear from Nathan saying that the food hub, they have you know, surplus from the farmers market as well. That's a really beautiful thing, and giving people access to fresh fruit and vegetables that's been locally and ethically sourced. Okay, Tim, I'm just checking that your hand is a old hand, and then I've got Adrian and then Mavis. Okay,
Hi.
Adrian and then Mavis.
Hi, thanks, Jenny. And of course, just to add to that, if we had universal basic income, then that would do away with poverty at a stroke. But the other thing I was going to say, and it came up at a meeting earlier this week, is I think, speaking from experience, I know that Nathan and Dee have done an amazing job in putting in bids, as a number of other community groups do. But what that does, it means that those groups who are not used to that, you know, nice middle class thing of knowing how to submit a grant application, knowing where to go to get grant applications, having internet access to fill them out, knowing the terminology to use, are once again disenfranchised. And the report that I've just put a link to in the chat talks about the importance of local hubs in building community resilience. That's all very well, but what we actually need to do is to provide training, funding and support for these hubs as well. They won't just exist on their own right. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian, and thank you for the link. Everyone, the link is in the chat if you want to have a look. So I've got Mavis and then I've got Lynsey. So Mavis, if you'd like to come in first, and then Lynsey. Thanks. Mavis, we can't hear you. You're still on mute if you are trying to speak.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Technical problem of finding the unmute button, and also you might work out that I'm not Mavis. I just wanted to kind of say a couple of things really. One is that, I mean, the efforts to tackle poverty are long-standing. 1965, Child Poverty Action Group was formed, and more or less at the same time, a much more radical claimants union was formed at a national and local kind of level. So there's a long history of trying to deal with poverty, both at local and national levels. And just in terms of the local national debate, when Blair was elected in 97 and did a lot of work initially with Gordon Brown around tackling poverty, had a policy commitment to eradicate child poverty, took out hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. That was all done from the top down, and much more effectively Sure Start programs and various schemes in education, and with, of course, the introduction of the minimum wage. And I think all of that, in a sense, does suggest the correct balance between what works, what needs to be done nationally, as opposed to what can be done locally. So although local tackling issues at a local level can potentially influence things nationally, what we see now is a national government that has no interest in tackling poverty, and indeed has had, as we know, a long period of austerity. So whatever we might be able to do to influence our local MPs and local councillors, or Conservative MPs, Conservative councillors, it doesn't really have much impact. It hasn't had much impact so far at a national level. So we need to think about what we can do nationally and what we can do locally. And at the local level, the best we can do is alleviate poverty rather than remove poverty. And the alleviation that at the very most, the local level you can get is the local employers to ensure that they pay minimum wage, or better still, a living wage. That's about it. That's about it, other than alleviation strategies that we've heard a lot of tonight. I do think it has implications for the Green Party in particular, because I think tackling poverty is a relatively new issue for the Green Party. The Labour Party has a lot stronger history around trying to address poverty, but for the Green Party, it's relatively new, I think. And I've seen recently in the local level, there's been an attempt to tackle the cost of, to equate the cost of living crisis with the energy crisis. And people have, there's been some recent publicity, for example, of saying that a response to the energy crisis and the increasing energy costs have been to do things like wear a warmer jumper and reduce the thermostat by 1 degree and not heat all the rooms in the household. And I think this is very misplaced advice, because the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis are in some ways, they're two quite different things. I don't think it's appropriate to be suggesting to people who have to make a decision between heating and eating to say wear a warmer jumper. People in that kind of situation have already worked that out. That's not where they are. And so I think the Green Party really needs to have a review of the kind of messages that it gives to people who are who are facing and living in poverty. A message which is really, I mean, it already has been referred to tonight, which is much more about how to increase incomes, not about how to reduce energy levels, because people in poverty, they already have reduced energy levels to the point where they can't afford any energy at all. So telling people to wear warmer jumpers, etc., doesn't really kind of work. So I think there are quite big questions for the Green Party in particular about what kind of messages we give to people when we're trying to address poverty issues.
Thank you for your comments. I'm not sure where the policy advice is coming from around wearing extra jumpers, but I think that social justice has always been a part of Green Party policy, just because they're well known as being a single issue party focused on environment doesn't mean that we haven't always had strong social justice policies that focus on true equality and a world that provides as much as possible for as many people as possible. But I take your point, you know, there is a lot of advice that is misplaced, and there's a lot of people who maybe don't understand the full realm of what people are going through, and this difference between energy poverty and true poverty, or I think someone really called it earlier normal poverty, which is horrible to think that that's something that's seen as normal now. But thank you so much for your comments, and hopefully the Green Party will better illustrate or describe what it means when it talks about these different things. So thank you. I can't remember, I didn't catch your name, and I know it's not Mavis, but thank you very much anyway. Okay, so Lynsey, let's go to you. Thank you very much.
Hi, yeah, I think from my perspective, there are certain things that have been really helpful and there's certain things that have really worked. The minute it stops working, and I noticed that Elizabeth put a question up about things like food bank, is when you have to ask for it or when you have to be referred for it, because that's where you have to come out of the woodwork. And if you don't want to, if you're not in the kind of mental space to be able to do that and to be able to say, yeah, I'm gonna ask for it, I need referrals, I need this, I need that, then you're not going to meet the needs of those people, and you certainly wouldn't have met my need in that space. Even down to things like, I mean, the food, the health and food activity food, whatever it was, the holiday stuff, where you could go to the council and get the box of food, which was great, but there was a, you know, and I did do it because it was 4 boxes of food, which was, you know, that fed us for, you know, really well. But it's a really kind of, you know, who are you going to see when you're down there? Who's going to see me do this? And certainly when it was being delivered to the school, it was even more of an issue. And I know I took mine, but I saw boxes that belonged to other people that weren't taken for that reason. So, I mean, it's really got to be that the benefits have got to be fit for purpose, and they're clearly not. I mean, and that's where the problem lies. And things like food hubs, the beautiful thing I think about the community hubs is that it's not just focusing on people who don't have, it is saying, right, there's all this surplus food. This is a ridiculous situation. You know, we're all very aware of you know, the need to you know, reduce waste and all the rest of it. And I'm getting a lot of people, because Uplands is quite a, you know, it's quite a mixed area. And I'm getting a lot of people who are enjoying coming and taking stuff from the farmers market, but are then bringing me bags full of stuff to distribute to the other hubs. So, you know, it's really positive. And the more that we can get people used to the idea that they can come to the hubs, it's not just for people who need cheap food or need to access free food. It is there for the community to use as a little corner shop. And for God's sake, if you're able to pay a little bit over the odds, and you usually stock in Waitrose and you're happy to pay a bit more for the carrots, the beautiful carrots that they've got on offer up at Middle of the Hill, then please do, because those pennies go an awful long way. And that's what the hubs are doing. And that you don't have to be referred to a hub. Nobody has to know. And it's not becoming more normalised because of the food. You know, I'm big on pushing the you know, let's address food waste. So yeah, that was the points I needed to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynsey. Okay, Nathan, I can see your hand up. This will probably be the last comment.
Yeah, I'll be really quick then.
Okay.
Lynsey's absolutely right. What really works for us is that so many different people come in and nobody knows, you know, what your motivation is for coming in. And increasingly people are coming because they're wanting to support the food hub and wanting to support the community. And actually, as Lynsey said, you know, where people, you know, put a bit more in the tin, you know, it's their way of supporting the community group and the food hub, where they can't perhaps offer time, but they can support in that way. Thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you, Nathan. Really lovely. Okay, so we're going to hear from Jim very quickly, and then Jade's final comment as a speaker, and then we will close down. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, hope you can hear me. Hold on. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight Mara, because we are operating and have been operating for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, providing hot food 3 times, well, initially twice a week for lunches, but now 3 times a week because the demand went up. So I just wanted to highlight that we are around, and also we pick up or take donated food from Waitrose, which we give out for free. All our meals are actually free and cooked on site. We also provide takeaways, and I'm aware of what the hubs are doing, which is absolutely great. I just wanted to highlight that Mara is around, and we operate from the Scout Hut in Stroud. So yeah, carry on the good work, and don't feel the stigma just by coming to Mara. There are all kinds of people that do come along. We've had people who's lost his job in finance industry come along. We learned that he was actually sleeping in a tent in one of the parks, and he felt very uncomfortable, but we put him at ease, and luckily within about 3 weeks he did manage to find a job. So do come along. We are there. Okay, thanks a lot for what you do.
Thank you so much, Jim. I think actually one of the first Stroud District Green Party meetings I ever went to, someone who was working at Mara was there. A fantastic community initiative as well. And yes, part of this absolutely wonderful, maybe alliance of community hubs and networks providing food for local people. Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we have managed to procure grants from Gloucestershire County Council and Stroud Town Councils. So don't feel ashamed if you need a bit of financial help, because I'm sure we could provide some.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim. That's lovely. Okay, so final word from Jade, and then we will close up the session for the evening. Thanks, Jade.
Yeah, so I just wanted to finish up with how we can help. Is there anybody who's how are we going to do this? We'll put it in the chat. if there's anybody who'd like to have another Zoom meeting to talk about whether we might start a campaign voice in Stroud, if you put your email in the chat, if that's okay, and then you can catch that, I think, for us, Jenny, can't you? And if there's 2 or 3 people, we'll organise another little Zoom meeting to see how we might get off the ground. And then I've put in the chat further up the list of the other food hubs. So if you want to volunteer, that would be really great. If you buy food in the supermarket, it can go to Mara, who are fantastic, or the food bank, who couldn't come tonight because they're in a meeting, but the food hubs work closely with the food bank, who was still doing a really good job. They've been in for a long time, very expert, very successful. So that's good. If you go to the farmers market, please buy something extra and leave it for us at 4 Seasons, and we'll collect it and distribute it with the other food to the food hubs. And Jenny, I think, are you going to give us a link or something like that to make a donation to the food hubs? Is that right?
So you can donate through the Action Network, which is where you signed up for this session, and anything that comes through will be donated to the food hubs. So thank you very much, and we really appreciate that will happen.
All right, Jenny, are you able to catch these emails that are coming in to invite them to? You'll catch those, will you?
Yeah, so the chat is saved, and we will give the email addresses to Elizabeth to share with you. But
thank you.
But
and then
yeah,
I'll
no problem.
I'll send a doodle around if there's a few people who'd like to have that conversation. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. And a special thank you to you, Jade, because I think you've actually pulled most of this together this evening and brought in these fantastic speakers, and also I'm sure quite a few of our audience this evening, which we really appreciate, and really appreciate having this conversation. It's a really important one to continue having. It's not something that can be solved overnight. It's something that is going to be an everlasting battle. And I think it was one of our speakers said, even if we got a different government tomorrow, it would still take a long time for policy to trickle down to the people that need it the most. So just a few final points. We break down the stigma. This can be happening to everybody. Even your happiest, smiliest friend or neighbor that you see could be struggling with poverty. We need a system that is fit for purpose. We need to continue action at a local level to alleviate poverty, but we also need to be organizing and lobbying and voting for a system and a government that, one, doesn't implement horrendous austerity policies for tens of years, but actually works on building a community, eradicating poverty, and creating a more equal society as a whole. So thank you so much for the work that you're all doing. We really appreciate you taking the time, which I'm sure is so precious, to come and talk to us this evening. The session is recorded. Please share it with other people in Stroud and beyond, because there's so much that other people can learn from this. And I'm putting a big action point that I think that we should organize some grant funding writing workshops for local organizations to come to, because there's practical action in sharing skills. So hopefully we're
doing one of those next week, Jenny, with the Landworkers Alliance. It's free.
Fantastic.
With
okay,
free,
amazing.
All the food hubs can come. It's free with free food. It's for beginners. We haven't done a grant application or any grant funding before. It's on the Deeds on the Stroud Brewery website, organised by the Landworkers Alliance.
Okay, amazing. Please share the link, and we will absolutely share it across all of our channels as well, just to make sure as many people as possible know about this, because I think it seemed like something people would be interested in. So thank you so much for sharing, Jade. Okay, thank you as always to all of our wonderful cloud cafeers, let's call ourselves. If everyone wants to put their camera on again and just give us a good wave. It was so lovely to see you all and hear you all, and have a lovely evening, and hopefully we will see you in April. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's going to be April soon. Enjoy, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Thank you again to our speakers and our participants. Give us a wave.
Jenny,
yes.
The next one is on the legacy of empire and colonialism on inequality and racism in the country at the moment. The next
Wow, there will be a lot to talk about on that one. Definitely.
So please everybody know about that. And Elizabeth can tell us the date. I think it's the 6th of April, is it?
I think you're right. I don't have my diary in front of me.
6th of April, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, hopefully we'll see you all there for what will undoubtedly be a very interesting conversation, as always.
Thanks for really great sharing, Jenny. Really efficient, really clear. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jade. That's lovely of you. Okay, have a good evening, everybody, and enjoy. Bye.